Excellent. And we're live. So welcome everybody to another edition of Tête-à-Tet. Today I've got a couple, actually it was supposed to be three wonderful guests, but the two who are here will hold the fort pro tem. So the COVID-19 pandemic was declared by the Director General of the World Health Organization on 11th of March 2020. Countries rapidly responded with lockdowns, and the UK was ordered to stay at home for the first time on 26 March 2020. A pattern emerged globally about the response to the pandemic, led by the institutional stakeholders in global healthcare and national legislatures. The general strategy followed lockdowns, social distancing, personal masking, essential travel only, work from home and for those who could, and school closures, while we waited for the vaccines, which were presented as the only solution to the global crisis. Most fell in line with the mainstream narrative presented in the media for the first few months of 2020. But as the death toll soared across Europe and the USA, criticism of the official medical policy, diagnostic methods, and censorship of dissenting voices, some hugely expert, started to grow. Now, a year and 9 months into the pandemic, other issues are causing disquiet worldwide. These issues center around bioethics and human rights. Critics are concerned about informed consent, mandatory vaccination, vaccine passports, and the vaccination of children as young as 12. Demonstrations have taken place in every major European capital and elsewhere. And throughout the past nearly 2 years, many have reported behaviors in their communities that are shocking and observed the social divisions caused by official COVID policy. So today I'm asking my guests what insights they've gleaned from theirs and society's reaction to the pandemic. They are UK-based podcaster and researcher Carol Mae Whittick, broadcaster Jojo Lemaire from Ghana, if he's able to join us, and London-based journalist Priscilla in Whipple. So folks, thank you so much for joining us. And let's see if we can have this conversation. I've officially titled it, What the Pandemic's Taught Us About Life and Society. So has this thing changed your worldview and your life views in any way? I'm not pointing fingers or giving a starter for 10. Priscilla, Carol, who's going to go first?
Carol's going first. I've volunteered Carol.
All right.
We're on.
So has it changed my worldview? Well, yeah, I would say that. I mean, how can it not really? Because I think the first thing that I've noticed that was different to me is it really just made me not want to be in the city anymore. And you know, it's taken like a year and a bit, like the whole movement of this whole thing, for me, and that feeling's not changed. In fact, it's got stronger and stronger that I've just not wanted to be in London anymore. And you're talking about someone who's been in London for like 25.
You're a city girl.
Yeah. 25 years. And I came from Birmingham. I grew up in Wolverhampton. So, you know, I kind of moved into larger and larger spaces. But when this happened, I just noticed a real change in the energetics of the city. And there was just this real cloud that just, I couldn't shake it. And even when I started to go to a lot of the protests, the first one that I went to was August 2020. And of course, nobody knew about that. But
What do you mean nobody knew about that?
Past the people who were there. I mean, and still to this day anyway.
So meaning it wasn't broadcast to, through the mainstream media at all? Is that what you're saying?
Actually, do you know what? I'll take that back. It was broadcast, in particular that one, because I did a little YouTube video on it, and they had kind of tied it up to be these COVID denier, QAnon, Trump supporter.
Got it.
They kind of, you know how
anti-vaxxer brigade.
Well, we weren't at the vax at that point.
Ah, right. Okay.
This was August 2020. But so
right.
even within that point, what it did is it just meant that for the, you know, past 3 or 4 months previous,
right.
a lot of us have just been sitting at home just going, you know, just knowing that something wasn't right. Okay. And then looking away from mainstream and finding alternative sources of media, and one that I actually started to collaborate with because I really felt aligned to it, and I wanted to do something to help as well. But outside of that, people didn't know. And one thing that I say that I'll say this and I leave it to Priscilla, was I noticed a change in how I started to perceive people that I thought were intelligent. So then it kind of gave me a little insight into like, what is intelligence? What do people really stand for? Because I put some of the pictures from that protest on my Facebook page, right. And I was met with somebody who I hadn't seen in person for 30 years. I didn't see them since the day I left school. Come onto my feed with kind of like scare-faced emojis going, what are you doing? You know, super spreader and that kind of thing. And just, you know, and it just brought people up out of the woodwork. And it started to really bring out a side in people that maybe we would never have witnessed, this underlying fear that people have, and this attachment to the media narrative, whatever it is, without question. And that's what I started to realize, is like, most people do not think for themselves. And that in itself became more and more surprising and disappointing and frustrating as
time went by.
Yeah,
we're going to come back to that now. Priscilla, what were you doing August 2020? Because I remember August 2020, I was mostly sitting in the garden drinking coffees and still observing what the devil was going on, and still scratching my head as to what this was all about. What were you doing in August 2020?
August 2020
seems like an age ago.
It does, doesn't it? I was volunteering, because I volunteer with my local authority, so I was volunteering with them. Right. I was also I had taken up a short course right. with Oxford University, I think it was. So right. I was busy with that, and I think I had taken a break. When I, with the show, I think I took a break at the end of August. Okay. So I was doing all of that at that point at August 2020, and really just observing what was happening, and picking up from where, what Carol said. Like you, Carol, I also began to question people's intelligence. I was having very interesting conversations with people that, it was just, for me, they were all just quite shocking at the different viewpoints, and how I think one of the things that got me more than anything was there were facts. One of those original facts is that there's a video that had been around for 10 years with Bill Gates telling us, the world, there are too many people on the planet. And if we do a really good job with fertility, if we do a really good job in fertility with vaccines,
right,
we could reduce this by 10 to 15%.
Correct. I remember that video. Yes.
And here we were, Bill Gates was up on every single platform. Whether that was online, whether it was, mainstream, whatever you want to call it. He was there lecturing the whole world, telling us all how, 7 billion people needed to be vaccinated.
Right.
And I kept on questioning, what rights do you have? Why do 7 billion people need to be vaccinated?
Right.
I couldn't rest with that. And I kept on questioning, what has this got to do with, because they kept on telling us it was the vaccine, the vaccine, the vaccine, that's the solution. So I began questioning that. And the people I was speaking to just thought, I remember one particular friend, as far as he was concerned, Bill Gates was a force for good. And the rest of us who questioned anything he did were, we needed help as far as he was concerned. So it got me really thinking about the way we think as, people. Got me thinking about how we can so easily be frightened. Also got me seeing how people are really not prepared to ask questions. There's no harm in asking questions. Asking questions does not make you, it doesn't mean that you object or you disapprove. It just means you're seeking understanding.
Can I come to that? Because we're going to look at that in terms of how we view how society itself responds. But I'm wanting to stay a little bit on our personal, individual kind of worldview and how that morphed. And whereas, if I may share mine, you see, whereas Carol seems to have picked up something not being right very quickly. You picked up something not being right very quickly. I was still trying to join and connect the dots up. And the first thing, around about August, I did a video talking about conflicts of interest because I started to worry that when I researched Bill Gates, I couldn't find anything negative about this man online. And I realized very quickly that at the time there was this very, well, for me, I'm not a cat lover, rather unpopular big fat moggy who lived next door, who felt that it owned every single backyard down the entire street. And I thought that you could actually, if you went online, find more negativity about that cat than you could about one of the richest men in the world. This filled me with disquiet. So I did this video about conflicts of interest and how there had to be a separation between the people who do the research, the people who manufacture the medicines that we're going to plan to use, and the people who make the policy. So there's a system of checks and balances, and it wasn't working for me. But the penny still hadn't entirely dropped. So, I started to realize for the first time what this business about philanthropy was. And I spent a lot of time then talking about what is philanthropy, who are the real philanthropists. And the thing that shocked me was the social reaction was, Tet, how dare you look a gift horse in the mouth? One. And two, that was the first time I realized that people were actually afraid to criticize those who were held up as, our social, for want of a better expression, our social betters. Yeah. So the situation there is that. Now, what about
Can I add another point as well there, Ted, as well? One of the things that really underlined my suspicion and turned my suspicion into outright disbelief was that, and I'm trying to remember the actual date, but it was probably around the 19th or the 20th of March. The whole thing actually got downgraded as a it's actually on the government website itself.
Yeah.
It actually got downgraded, this whole coronavirus thing.
As a non-event.
Yeah. So before we even got locked down. So that's when I was like, well, why are we doing all of this when you've put it on your own site that this is not a thing anymore? Yeah. So that's like, even before we probably got locked down, I'm like, well, why are we doing this? Because they themselves put it out there. So that's why I was just like, I don't know what's happening here.
I learned about that this year, Carol, that it had been downgraded. And at that point, I was like, excuse me. But my eureka moment, in that was because I was ill 19th, 20th. I was ill from about the 16th. I became unwell. And this went on for about a month, call it that, 3 weeks to a month. So as I was recovering, and I had COVID, as I was recovering, I remember sitting in front of my TV one day. I was, just having coffee, and I was watching the news, and they were announcing the usual numbers and everything. And I just had a thought. And the thought was in the question, how many people will normally die in the UK in a day? So I went to the Office of National Statistics website, and there and then, comparing the week I was in to the year before and the year before that, I realized that in an average day, in that same week, it was something like 15,000 people. So in an average day, you will have between, for want of a better, for my maths, let's call it maybe about 2,000 people thereabouts would have died in an average day. And then you're now telling us in our lockdown that 700, 900. At that point, when I got that, the fear just evaporated. And then I began to question, because then I was like, hold on, we're not driving, so there are no car accidents. Suiciders are not going to, because everybody's at home and we can't really go out. Murderers are not in business at this time.
Wow. Well,
you know what I mean? I started doing the breakdown, and I thought, well, nah. So if people were down in their homes, we would know. And at that point, I just thought, nah, we need to go and check this out. I started questioning. I started looking more into things. My whole viewpoint just, did a 360, and it hasn't reverted since.
Can I, Carol, were you going to say something just now?
Well, no, it was just the point that there's not necessary to elaborate. Just when you were saying there were no murders, just
it was limited.
Sure.
You
see, when
it wasn't happening.
It wasn't what I mean.
You know where I'm going with that, but you know what I mean. That's what I'm referring to. Is like it wasn't happening. Like the murderers weren't out on the loose.
Okay,
thank you. That's what I mean.
Operating in specific areas.
Okay. There was one other thing for me when it comes to what I observed. Carol actually interviewed me on HER, Higher Energetic Resonance. Which is her podcast. You should all go and check it out. It's fantastic. I'll put a link to it at the bottom of this program. That one day I saw a bunch of kind of, I would say, kind of very middle class, fairly well-to-do people in a UK suburb queuing up outside Waitrose, and they all looked so down at heel. They all looked so completely beaten. They were like, like chickens that have been dropped in water. They came out all soggy and quite pathetic. And these, this was the Range Rover and the Pearl and Twinset Brigade with the Mulberry bags and Argos at home. And these are the people who literally walk down the road as if they expect traffic to melt before them as they make their grand progress, down the main drag of the city. And I realized that these people it was as if something had been killed, a light had been dimmed in them. And I knew then that something awful was going on in this country and that this wasn't normal. I said to myself, how can people ordinarily so arrogant, so proud, so pompous, so projecting of themselves as those in who the image of the world itself was created, be so beaten? I knew then that something was interfering with their mindset, their ego, their self-esteem, and everything else. Actually, it was that day I realized that we're in very, very, very deep trouble. And of course, right after that, I asked myself, but how didn't we see this coming? And it was a bit like Brexit, because I expected the Brexit vote to be won for the Remainers, and it wasn't. But it was like that times about 10, because I knew that in this case, whatever was happening was being done by Brits to Brits, and somebody was destroying this society. I'm going to move on, if I may, now to the whole idea of spiritual consciousness and spiritual awareness. I mean, if your life view has changed, how has it changed in relation to your spirituality? How more or less important is spirituality to you now? And how is it connected to the events around the pandemic? Priscilla.
Wow. My spirituality has always been important to me, but I think it's been heightened now. It's been heightened in the sense that nothing around me makes any sense. And the only place where I can make sense of it, if you like, it's spiritually. So I spend more time now in prayer, if you like, and just trying to understand from the physical realm, looking at things in the physical realm and looking at it and asking the questions within the spiritual realm to say, okay, so in the physical, this is what we see going on, but what is the real force behind it? Where is it coming from? What is giving rise to it? Because we are spiritual beings, and nothing we see happen in the physical happens without it first happening in the spiritual. That's my understanding. So, and in order for you, or in order for us to understand what is going on in the physical, we need to have our spiritual connection heightened. We need to have the discernment. We need to have the understanding. And it is by doing that that we're able to understand what is going on around us in the physical, and also how we should better manage it, as it were. And I think that it is extremely important. And having seen what has happened over the last 18 months, going into going into 2 years, I think more than ever, we need to be spiritually connected.
That's amazing. Carol May,
I
she's
would
talking
agree.
about discernment.
Yeah, and about the spirituality. I'm in full agreement. One, I'm glad that it's always been part of my life to have some sort of relationship with God, universe, spirit, to always be thinking about praying, to always find some sort of connection and reach out and call out and have some inner dialogue in order to find strength through difficult situations, because that connection has got me through difficult connection situations time and time and time again. And so that I know that I can go there when everything looks like it's a mess. And I'm not even talking about, when your life is like, I don't even know how I'm going to deal with this, is to go there and to try and keep having that communion and that conversation. I will say also that over that year, especially in the first few months, I leaned on it and I really clung to that more than ever and prayed more than I think I've ever prayed in my entire life, because I'm like, the world is turning around in a way that I didn't think was possible. But this is it. But also with the spirituality and from religion to different spiritual belief systems, is there has always been talk that there is going to be a change of ages. We're going to come out of one age and go into another. And I do believe that that's potentially what we're at. We're on the cusp of something, and something is breaking down and something is being reborn. I personally have not given birth, but I have it on good authority that it's painful. So, you know what I mean? So I believe that that's what's happening. And what we're also seeing is we're just getting more, we're seeing more and more the structure and more the feeble, the feeble legs that all of this stuff is built on. It is literally like the man behind the curtain at the end of The Wizard of Oz. It's just one man making a lot of noise, but it's broadcasting out. The media has got the blanket on everyone, and it does take away people's discernment. If you don't have a connection to anything, if you don't have a belief in anything, if you don't understand who you are as that spiritual being, and you're not strong and fortified in that on a daily basis, then yeah, if you turn on the telly and they keep telling you that all these people are dying, and it's coming to you because you know, someone like looked at you in the supermarket. I mean, the amount of times I remember, especially in the first lockdown, when I'd be walking down the road and grown people would leap into the road sooner than walk past me in on the street, on the pavement, in the open air. So if you've got that level of fear about you, then you don't have that connection. You can't do, because if you do have some sort of level of connection, you'll know that somebody just walking past you on the street is not going to kill you.
Amazing. So in your estimation, Priscilla, what do you think is the spiritual awareness, generally speaking, of society? You know, by reference to what you've spoken about spirituality, by reference to what Carol May's just spoken about spirituality, how do you see the spiritual awareness, spiritual discernment, spiritual development of the society in which we live at the moment?
Oh wow, what a question! I think it's my eyes are so opened to how low they are, and I'm not saying that because I think mine is so much more higher. No, I was looking to, especially within the church sector, if you like. I think for many of us who go to church or who belongs to whatever religious
Denomination?
beliefs we may have or denominations, we sort of looked, I think, in that time to our spiritual leaders.
Yes.
And I think we wanted to hear them tell us something. We wanted them to provide us with some understanding that perhaps we felt we couldn't reach, or they could tell us something new. And I think a lot of people felt let down in that time. And it was interesting for me, just, watching. Carol said she prayed a lot more than she had ever prayed. I was fortunate to I have a group of women, we literally it grew in the pandemic because we were all in lockdown and we were online. And so we had people joining us from across the world, literally. And we would meet daily. And it was a way that we encouraged ourselves, through just coming together and praying. And it just became a real important source of encouragement, confidence, growth, development, you name it. But then it was so interesting to note, speaking to people, whether they belonged to the church or they didn't belong to the church, and noting that, they appeared spiritually unaware. And it just sort of took me into, there's the good book, the scriptures tells us that even the very elect will be fooled. I didn't expect that to be in my lifetime.
Even the very elect would be, say
They will
that
be
again,
fooled.
would be fooled.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
So I didn't expect to see that. I feel I am seeing a lot of that right now. I feel that that's manifesting. I mean, it's shocking for me, but it's also interesting to see an awakening in some of the young people as well, who may not necessarily belong to a religion or a denomination or anything like that. But a lot of them, some of them are able to really give you a good understanding and breakdown of what's happening. So their spiritual consciousnesses, awakened, and they are seeing and they're able to somehow tap in. And they can tell you, no, I don't think this is, no, I'm not, it's not what you think, or I'm going to sit this one out, or I'm just going to wait. I'm not sure about that, or I'm not doing that.
They're not
I've seen
fooled.
a lot of that. Yeah.
They're not
So,
fooled. Can I
no.
just say that this is the first time throughout all of this process I have heard anybody say what is palpably true about the absence of spiritual leadership through all of this. Carol May, I didn't know. It's the first time I've actually heard anybody finger it. I'm going to ask Carol May, what's your take on society's general level of spiritual development?
I don't think it's there, you know, to make a blanket statement about it. I don't think that the average person has any kind of belief, because the whole idea of spirituality or having some sort of faith or following a religion to one way or another has been so demonized that people will poo-poo the idea, you know, and will sooner laugh at you when you say anything about that, when you say that you're praying or when you say that you're reading the Bible or anything like that. It's just so interesting that how, you know, you can only look on the internet and memes will go around, you know, quotes with a name at the bottom, and it could be right or wrong, and people will like tick it and share it and everything like that. But if you put a scripture up, it's just has that thing. And whatever you think about the Bible, there's a lot of good lines in there that you can just take the lines out, you know, the couple of words or the lines, and just meditate on those things and allow that to guide your mind. And without that spirituality, it just gets put as you're wacky if you do it. If you're part of anything that has a belief system in something bigger than you that you can connect to, it doesn't make sense. And yet people are doing exactly the same thing because their religion and their belief system are these so-called doctors and scientists, the government, the television. They worship these things in the same way that people would have faith in their god or their guru or anything like that. Not to say that's better or worse, but one of them is leading them down the other path, to not help them or to not really incite in people a need and an ability to actually have a connection that will make you stronger and make you be able to stand in the face of anything. Because also, when you start to take on this point of view, you're going to face a lot of attack. And it's not even just from the outside world. You're going to have to face it in your peer group, or even for some people in their own home. And if you're not steadfast and strong within yourself and have some sort of connection, you will fold, or you won't be able to handle it in a way that will be able to get you through, or be able to be an example to people who are being misled and are being guided to evil. And when you're able to have some sort of spirituality or religion or belief, you can sniff out evil. You see what evil is, and you also are able to recognize that it exists. Because I think that's one of the issues that's going on at the moment, and has been in conversations that I've had with people before. They don't believe that evil exists. They don't understand how evil works. Evil will sit by you and look like your best friend right until the end moment, and it will push you off the cliff. Evil isn't just sitting on a spinning chair, you know, it's not cackling, it doesn't look like a witch. That's not what evil is. And what we're living through a time of evil manifesting and really showing itself. And because people don't recognize evil, they're being led without that spirituality within them.
Can I say that what you say here, Carol, begs the obvious question? Do you think, both of you, do you think it's by design that people are so spiritually poor, that people are so spiritually impoverished, undeveloped, basically non-existent, so that they can be influenced as heavily as they are being influenced by whatever the mainstream media tells them is the case? What's your view?
It has to be, and it has to have been a slow picking away at any kind of connection or belief that people might have had in order to pull this one. It wouldn't have worked otherwise.
Right. Priscilla?
And I just wanted to correct, you know, when you asked me earlier, yes. It's actually even the very elect shall be deceived. It's the same thing, but the word itself is deceived, because I know people will take me up on that. Yeah. So I absolutely agree with what Carol is saying. People don't recognize evil. And it is, I had this conversation in a group yesterday, I think it was, saying that you need to understand that a lot of people are not walking around or sitting in their homes or going to their jobs and just thinking how they're going to destroy a lot of other people. And so when when it's that way, they can't recognize, they cannot identify. It just doesn't make sense to them how.
It's just like, just because they're not bank robbers, then bank robbers don't exist.
Thank you. But what we fail to understand, as I often say to people, is this: we are all capable of murder. The vast majority of us choose not to. It's a choice. We're capable of it. Should we want to, we can make it happen. But the vast majority of us choose not to. So in this situation, people don't even want to acknowledge it. They are choosing to run away from it. They are choosing to say, no, it is not so. It can't be. Why would you say something like that? What would they gain from it? Is the favorite question that I often get. And then I just think, never mind. Then, it means that, we're not spiritually connecting the dots. We're not spiritually questioning what's going on. We're not looking at it from a spiritual standpoint.
Okay.
And I think if we were doing that, if we stopped, paused, and one of the other things we need to understand is this. Let's go into one of the arguments that was taking place within the Christian circle was, well, especially when we came around to taking the vaccine, there were huge arguments about what the Bible says about the mark of the beast, or what's not the mark of the beast, and if this was it, and all of that. And the Bible says we have to obey the law of the land, and the law of the land says. So there were a lot of that, and a lot of them have walked into it because they believe they're obeying the law of the land. So they've sort of taken it from that angle. And they spend a lot of time, as I often say, consistency equates to trust. And when we're consistent in doing something, people that are watching us over time will then begin to trust and believe. Very few will research what we're doing and look into it and question where it is coming from, and ask whether or not it's coming with an agenda.
I mean, what's truly scary about what you're saying, Priscilla, is that people follow the letter of whatever their religion says, but they completely lose its intent.
No, they choose to.
Yeah, I mean, they completely lose it. The purpose being that they are supposed, as individuals, to evolve in spirit, but they are, following the law of their tenets by rote, but actually there isn't any growth happening. So as a result of that, they're not getting any discernment. And so if they're being led by their society into literally the gates of hell or over a cliff edge, they will blithely just walk up to the cliff edge and jump off.
Oh, absolutely. And what I have seen, there are a lot of, church leaders who are saying, do this. I've done this. Go and do it. It's fine. There are no issues with it. There's a lot of that. And you've got members who, because, I've had people say, in conversations say, yeah, but pastor's done it. And I'm like, okay. So is that why you're going to do it?
Yeah, it's just like follow my leader.
They're following their leaders.
Yeah. Look, I've got one last question to ask about this, which is, given what you've seen in how we've responded in society and what you have experienced for yourself, what insights are you drawing into why you're here, the purpose? I mean, there's a reason. Do you feel that there is any kind of reason to the terrible shocks we have endured? Because the reason I ask is this: for a long time, I thought, blimey, my generation skipped anything really nasty. Okay, we had a bit of the Cold War for a while, but because they were always shouting at each other, it was actually quite unlikely that they were ever going to nuke each other. So I thought, the generation before, Second World War, generation before that, First World War. So I thought, look, we got to buy on this thing. However, I actually now believe that we are at the greatest turning point in the history of humanity since time, I don't know, since maybe the Great Ice Age or whatever. So what do you feel is your purpose, is the purpose of us being here now at this time? If you care to share that with me. Who's going to go first? I won't
Shall I go?
won't suggest it.
Please.
Well, I've got a voice, you know, and I speak about things and I observe things, and when all of this really came to looking like, when the penny really started to drop to me that this was like some real BS going on, you know, it wasn't just like this 2 weeks that we thought it was going to be, because I lost my income stream. It all collapsed. So I needed to keep myself busy, and I just got led to kind of start digging up things that I'd had so many loose ends. I've always been distrustful of what came out of the television anyway. I did a media course like back in the day, like it was what they call a BTEC. No, it wasn't like any kind of highfalutin course, but what I learned on that course, because it was about video editing and putting things together, is I learned how you could manipulate a little bit of footage and make it into something completely different. And I did it. We could make things into 5 different ways of things, with the way that you cut it and the way that you put the music together. And from that point, and that was me in my 20s, so you're talking like 30 odd years ago, just became super suspicious of things. But also, when things would come at me from the TV, or when things would get mentioned, like something would happen or someone got killed or 9/11 or this, or I just know that it wasn't. I'm like, I don't know. I always had this mistrust about things, and I always had these loose threads of questioning, but I didn't know what to do with it. And I had an interest in media. I started the podcast and all of these kind of things. And what happened is when this whole thing started March 2020 to April 2020, and I started to really change what I was putting out on my platform and collaborating with another, I've always felt that I was an outsider in society. So I was never doing things at the right time. You know, I didn't get married, I didn't buy a house, didn't have children. You know, all the things I was supposed to do when I was supposed to do them, I never did. I just kind of went my own way and did my own thing, trying to always trying to play catch up to this thing that I didn't really want to be part of anyway. But you know, it's like maybe I should just keep trying to keep on the coattails of whatever this thing is going. But what happened for me when this whole thing dropped and people just couldn't see it, suddenly I didn't feel like an outsider anymore. I felt more like an insider. I was able to see. And from the inside of being able to see what was happening, was then able to broadcast out. Whether people were listening or not at that point in time, or up until this day, wasn't really important. It was just like, I can't not speak. I can't not 5-10 years down the line, when we're at whatever point we're going to be able to put my hand on my heart and say that I didn't do everything in my power, or I didn't speak up. I want to be able to tell this story to the future generations in my family and people that I know, and be truthful about the part that I played in it, because I saw something and I couldn't keep quiet. And that's what I feel. It feels very purposeful to speak out and do what I'm doing right now for as long as it needs to be done. I can't just sit. I know there's going to be a lot of egg on faces for people when the penny finally drops, and they will have to spend, you know, the remainder of their life lying about it, going, yeah, you know, I saw it. I've seen people do it already.
Yes.
You know, already going, yeah, I knew it was a lie. No. So it feels.
Can I ask Priscilla, what's your purpose in all of this, based on what you've seen, you know, what you've gleaned and discerned for yourself? What's your purpose at this time?
I think, you know, before now, my purpose was to use my voice, which I was doing. I say was because I think I haven't put out my regular program for about a year now. So that is my purpose. And I'm working on now coming back to that, to using my voice, to drawing people's attention to what we know to be the truth. When I say that, what I mean by that is, let's take, for example, as Carol mentioned earlier, on the government website, COVID was downgraded to a flu. And that happened in 2020. That's not me saying it. That's what the government said. How many of us are aware of that? Whether you want to accept it, whether you want to agree with it, you don't. This is the reality. This is what's there. And what I have found over this time is that there is so much information in our faces, but people are not willing to engage with them. But there isn't anybody, a lot of us are now out there putting these information out there to say, hey, this is what I found. This is what it says. And so I'm working on coming back, to my programs and saying, this is what I understand. This is what they are saying. This is what's there. So if you choose to not engage with it, just understand that you won't be able to blame them. You need to engage with it and make up your own mind as to what you believe is going on here. Don't rely on whatever I'm saying as the gospel truth. No, but I can help you bring the information to you to say, this is what I have found. This is what's happening here. This is what happened in Ouagadougou yesterday. This is what, happened there, and it's up to you to look at that and let it be that when it's all said and done, that, okay, there was somebody or there were a group of people who were saying this, who were pointing us, who were directing us and explaining what was available, but we made a choice of our own. I think it's important for that, because there are a lot of people who are just yearning for leadership, just yearning for someone to be able to someone
point them in the right direction.
Absolutely. A lot of people are yearning for that. And what has been unfortunate in this is, when they say using trusted voices, as it were, and so they've engaged with people and paid them, and these people have gone out to advertise, take this. And then I ask the question, fair enough, you want to take it, that's okay. But what is the long-term impact,
consequence
on your body? And then they say, I don't know. Then I say, okay, well, this is what Professor Tam told us back in January, when the question was put to him, what is the long-term effect or impact? And he simply said, we don't know. So if he doesn't know, and he's supposed to be the government number 2 scientist advising the government and on our TV as often as we can blink, then what do I know?
Fantastic. Okay, look, I'm going to close this off now and play the old card about doing a sequel. I mean, there has to be a part 2, because there are.
You had a lot of questions, and we haven't even got through to the questions.
No, well, we've only actually done a third of the program, but the thing is that the insights that you were sharing were really so interesting that there was no point running through them and not going forward. So I'm going to have to invite you to come back so we can do part 2 on this thing. And for now, thank you both. That's Priscilla and Whippo and Carol Mae Whittick, for a fantastic afternoon of conversation. Talk to you soon. Thank you so much for coming.
Anytime, Ted. Thank you.
Pleasure. Bye.
Thanks for the invite.